Gives me great pleasure to introduce my better half and our next Vice President of the United States, Bill Weld.
Thank you, baby. Well, that was an address full of true facts. It's a great pleasure to be back in New Hampshire after only a short absence. I was up here fishing just a few weeks ago up in the great metropolises of Surrey and Gilsum. But one reason it is a great pleasure to be here is our informal motto around Libertarian headquarters is live free. You know, this is live free or die country, and we are very much at home here. I've spent a lot of time campaigning up here over the years with various New Hampshire candidates, and I take the measure and the timber of the people, and they are really our kind of people, which is why you're going to see us back here often between now and November 8th. So, you know, further to what Leslie said, I do feel both hope and excitement, and I'm filled with happiness these days. Because I think things are happening, and Gary and I, in a way, are breaking a glass ceiling in making the world safe for alternate voices, in addition to the monopoly parties in Washington who've done such a great job delivering with their partisan hype the last 10 years.
Yes, more choices!
Right. So we do offer a mix of policy views that is not represented by either other party. We not only say that we're fiscally responsible and conservative, we can prove it, because both of us were two-term Republican governors of blue states. We succeeded Democratic governors. Both of our states were in a fiscal hole when we took over. In my case, I remember cutting taxes 21 times, cutting spending. At the beginning of my first term, Massachusetts had the highest unemployment rate of the 11 industrial states. At the end of my first term, it had the lowest, because people... One of my slogans when I was in office is there's no such thing as government money, there's only taxpayers' money, and it's good when government observes that. That should be posted in both the major party headquarters, I suggest. On the social side, you know, the Libertarian Party is synonymous with liberty and freedom, and we really feel that whatever views anybody wants to have on gay marriage, abortion, immigration, difficult issues, that's fine as long as they don't try and force it on others and rub anybody else's nose in it. So you could call us almost agnostic. So when pollsters get out there and really ask the American people how they feel about things, it turns out that 55 to 60% of the people in the United States identify with that combination of fiscally responsible and socially inclusive. 55 to 60%. That's a pretty big addressable market. Yeah. Gary likes to say that we really have a 6-lane highway going right up the middle between the two monopoly parties. And it means that what we have to do is get in a situation where we can speak frankly and openly to them with the whole world watching. And that means getting into the presidential debates in September and October. There's a lot of ways to do that. One way is to poll at 15% nationwide. Another way is to poll over 15% in a certain number of swing states. Gary right now is polling at over 15% in 5 or 6 swing states, so that test has already been met. He is polling at 11, 12, 13% in recent polls, and that's with only 30% of the people in the country knowing who he is. When we get out there and spend money the next month and crisscross the country, get that figure up to 50%, his favorable is going to go not to 15%, but to 20, 25%. So that test will be met. third way to be in the debates is there was a commission in 2013, the Annenberg Commission, that made recommendations to the presidential debates body about rule changes they should do. And, you know, they had people from both sides. And they recommended that the percentage be lowered to 10% for the first debate. And that would put us in right away. And with the name recognition that Gary got from the first debate, he'd go to 15. So we'd be in there all the way. So that would be another possible avenue. A fourth avenue is people may start to take note of the fact that the debate commission is a tax-exempt entity, so they have to be nonpartisan. And the thought has crossed my mind and that of others that saying we want only R's and D's. You can't be L's, even if they're on the ballot in 50 states. That's not nonpartisan, that's bipartisan, and that's a violation of neutrality. But maybe the most straightforward way for us to get into debates is just the force of popular opinion. There was a poll that came out today that said that 62% of the American public thinks we should be in the debates. That's a big figure. Abraham Lincoln said, without public opinion, nothing is possible. With it, anything is possible. Those are true words. So we look forward to carrying the banner into September and October. We have no ambition short of running the table and winning the whole thing when we get there, because we think we have winning arguments. Nobody can deny that we made a difference in our states. Nobody can deny that we worked across the aisle with Democrats to get stuff done, which they don't do so much in Washington, D.C. Nobody can deny that we were fiscally conservative, that we cut spending, and that we balanced the budget. That hasn't been done in Washington, D.C. in many decades. So we're not just saying here's a promise, as from the Democrats, as to all the wonderful things we're going to do for free, or really a conclusory statement from the Republican standard bearer, just it's going to be great. No particular granularity about how we're going to get there, because frankly I don't think he has the granularity. He just has the adjectives and the adverbs, no facts. But in our case, it's a settled fact as to what we've done, and I think that'll make a difference to the voters when they really look at the situation. And I think the point that Leslie, my wife, made is an important one, that this is a year when people have almost a responsibility to take matters in their own hands and think for themselves and make a considered choice. And people say, oh, isn't a vote for a third party a wasted vote? Well, it's really not. It's really not if the so-called third party is the one that you agree with. In fact, voting for someone you don't agree with, that's a wasted vote. One final very broad point. We were asked inside, we were doing a media avail by a TV station, what kind of America do you want to have? And my answer was, I want to have an America where people's teeth are not set on edge against each other, where groups are not set against groups, where groups are not discriminated against as a group, where everybody can pursue their own dreams and freedom and liberty, where the happiness and the prosperity and the liberty of the American people is maximized, where the individual can never be thrust in a corner. That's the essence of a functioning democracy in my book, and that's the kind of America that I have in view. And frankly, it's not the kind of America that we've seen with the screaming match between the two major parties this calendar year. And I think the American people, upon hearing from us and seeing us, will get the idea that with Honest Johnson in the White House, that's the name that's going to stick, Honest Johnson. There will be no more sanctimonious speeches out of the White House. There will be no more bullying and braggadocio out of the White House. There's just going to be good government out of the White House. It's a distinct difference in tone and it's fueled by the man who's going to be responsible for making the prediction come true that we can run the table and win it all, and that would be the next president of the United States, Gary Johnson.
Oh, man. Wow. Wow. Everybody here is crazy for coming out in this weather. Oh, man. Thank you. Thank you. You honor us. Thank you. Thank you. So, come on, is this the craziest election that you have ever seen? I mean, really, isn't this the crazy? And how crazy is it? I'm going to be the next president of the United States. That's how crazy it is, all right? That's really going to happen. Beyond my wildest dreams, Bill Weld is my running mate. We are planning a partnership here which is unique. You get two for the price of one. I am comfortable in my own skin telling you that I am the lesser half of the ticket, and that's a good thing. Like I said, that's really a good thing. You know, libertarians, really, the big 6-lane highway down the middle, being fiscally conservative, being socially inclusive, and skeptical that these military interventions, that when we involve ourselves in regime change, it's ended up with a world less safe, not more safe. Fiscally conservative. I've got one piece of advice for everybody here today, and it's worth exactly what you're paying for it, which is nothing. But the one piece of advice is that whatever it is that you know, whatever it is that you do, apply it entrepreneurially. There will never be a greater reward in your life, creating your own job, creating jobs for others. And when it comes to government, government can play a role in making that as easy as possible, and you have Bill Weld and my pledge that we will make that as easy as possible. Reduce barriers to entry, make it easy. The economy of the future, the sharing economy, Airbnb. I mean, come on, the whole world wants to come and visit Concord. The whole world wants to come to New Hampshire and visit. Airbnb affords that opportunity. Government gets in the way of Airbnb. I'm in Baltimore. I'm talking to a young woman who got her doctorate in science. She says, I have these horrible student debts, but I figured out a way to pay them back. Airbnb. Man, I have a pathway to paying them all back, but guess what? City of Baltimore stepped in and banned Airbnb. Well, that's government. No, it happens. Uber right now. Uber is being opposed by Hillary Clinton. I think the model of the future is Uber everything. It's allowing you and I, with what we know, to be able to deliver what we know to the end user without a middleman. We make more money. The end user pays less. I mean, it's a win-win situation. But in my opinion, like I say, that is the model of the future. Crony capitalism. Look, we're all against crony capitalism, but I think that the majority of Americans right now have associated crony capitalism and free trade as one and the same, when in fact they are absolute opposites. Crony capitalism is when the government gets involved, when the government picks winners and losers. Free market is when the government doesn't get involved. Right now, with regard to the internet, look, we all have an equal opportunity with everybody else in the world right now because of the internet. I think the greatest freedom tool that has ever existed. And right now, I'll tell you what, there's a slew of legislation right now that is trying or will try to limit those, limit the ability of those to be successful on the internet. They're going to try and limit that ability to those that have been successful and have made money. Count on Bill Weld and I to make sure that that doesn't happen as president and vice president. You know, when you talk about spending and when you talk about reducing spending, who are we doing that for? We're doing that for future generations. Look, we're headed to a fiscal cliff in this country unless we get spending under control. We're not going to have a health care safety net unless we actually address the entitlements, Medicaid and Medicare. Having a safety net for those in need, for those on welfare, having a safety net for those over 65, yes, we can do that. Reforming Social Security. Look, if we're going to put our heads in the sand over this, And Clinton and Trump both are saying that they're not going to address the entitlements. Well, if they don't address the entitlements, look, they're not going to be around for future generations, and we owe that to future generations. So with regard to Social Security, I mean, you've got to raise the retirement age. You have to reform Social Security so that it will be around. With regard to Social Security, you could also have a very fair means testing. How much should you get back more money from Social Security than what you put in? Well, you could have a very fair means testing when it comes to Social Security. Given a certain level of income, you shouldn't get back more than what you put in. But there are reforms that can take place to ensure that we will have this going forward. Certainty in government. Look, we're not looking to get elected king or dictator. We're looking to get elected president and vice president, and there are constitutional restraints on being president and vice president. So count on us. Count on certainty that when it comes to making taxes simpler, when it comes to lowering taxes, count on certainty that we will support lowering taxes, never raising taxes, never making life more difficult when it comes to filing taxes, when it comes to the IRS, making it easier to comply with the rules, with the regulations. But if I could wave a magic wand, I would abolish income tax, I would abolish corporate tax, I would replace it with a federal consumption tax that if we did that, I believe for no other reason, tens of millions of jobs would get created in this country, because why would you start up or grow a business anywhere in the world given a zero corporate tax rate in the United States? And who pays for corporate tax? We pay for corporate tax. Don't kid yourself. And if we had one federal consumption tax, no income tax, no corporate tax, pink slips would get issued to 80% of Washington lobbyists, because that's why they're there. They're there to garner tax favor. We should be embracing immigration. We are a country of immigrants. So the notion of deporting 11 million undocumented workers has a basis in misunderstanding, in misinformation. These are people that are hardworking. They're just like you and I. You can't get across the border to get jobs that are there that U.S. citizens don't want. So you have to cross illegally to get those jobs. And if it were you and I, we would be doing the same thing for our families, for our betterment. Don't build a fence across the border. That is just a crazy notion. Donald Trump watched the Olympics really, really closely to determine how high the Mexican pole vaulters could go. Make it as easy as possible for somebody that wants to come into this country and work to be able to get a work visa. And a work visa should entail a background check and a Social Security card, that applicable taxes get paid. When the government applies quotas to immigration, there's problems with quotas. Look, no quotas. There will either be work or there won't be work. And right now, there are more Mexicans going back across the border into Mexico because there are more jobs in Mexico right now than in the U.S., and illegal border crossings are at a 10-year low at the moment. It's just not an issue. It's a political boogeyman that doesn't exist, and I am speaking as a border governor. Free markets. Free markets really is the key. Health care. President Obama's health care plan it's a cat out of the bag. I agree with Chief Justice Roberts that it's a tax. My insurance premiums have quadrupled, and I haven't seen a doctor in 3 years. It's a tax. But if we are to reform health care in this country, and count on Bill and I when it comes to health care to sign on to anything that's going to make health care more affordable, it's going to make for better health care. But here's how you make better health care, and that would be a truly free market approach to health care. Yeah. And by the way, health care right now is as far removed from free market as it possibly can be. In a free market approach for health care, you and I would not have insurance to cover ourselves for ongoing medical need. We would have insurance to cover ourselves for catastrophic injury and illness, and we would pay as you go in a system that I'm going to guess would cost 1/5 of what it currently costs. You would have advertised pricing. You'd have advertised outcomes. Right now we go to the doctor. We have no idea what it's going to cost. The person providing the services has no idea what it's going to cost. We get a bill and know that nobody is going to actually pay that bill. Well, if you brought a free market approach to healthcare, you would have stitches are us. You would have x-rays are us. You would have gallbladders are us. No telling what we would have, but I guarantee you it would be advertised pricing, it would be advertised outcomes, and it would be much, much less costly. Standing out in the rain. Oh man, you do us honor, you really do. Term limits is a silver bullet. Come on, term limits. If we had term limits, politicians would do the right thing as opposed to whatever it takes to get reelected. We would not have a $20 trillion debt if term limits were in effect. Fiscally conservative, socially inclusive. Socially inclusive, what does that mean? It means that we should be able to make choices in our own lives on everything, unless those choices put other people in harm's way. That's when government has a role. But with regard to choices, believing in marriage equality, believing in the constitutional right of marriage equality, abortion. How can there be a more difficult decision in anyone's life, and anyone, that would be the woman involved, on whether or not to have an abortion? But who, other than the woman involved, should be making that choice? No one but the woman involved should be making that choice. Let's legalize marijuana in this country. We have tens of millions of Americans in this country who are convicted felons that, but for our drug laws, would otherwise be tax-paying, law-abiding citizens. We have mandatory sentencing. Let's give discretion to judges when it comes to sentencing. Let's do away with mandatory sentencing. The biggest category of prisoner in federal prison today is the individual who has sold small amounts of drugs on numerous occasions and been caught. Victimless, non-violent crime. As President of the United States, as Vice President, we're promising to deschedule marijuana as a Class 1 narcotic right off the bat. The legalization of marijuana will be a state's issue similar to alcohol. That's just the way that it will be and the way that it should be, states' rights. And in the context of states' rights, I was more outspoken than any governor in the country regarding school choice, that we should allow alternatives to public education. Unleash 1 million educational entrepreneurs to deliver better products and better services when it comes to education. I can't believe we're still doing the bricks and mortar thing, kindergarten through 12th grade, and then moving on to higher education. We can do better than that. But what is it that the federal government should do when it comes to education? Not to be there in the first place. New Hampshire gives, and this isn't just the Department of Education, it's the federal government. But New Hampshire gives the federal Department of Education 13 cents, and then they get back 11 cents. How do you like that equation? And get back, you give it to them in the first place. Now they're going to give you back 11 cents. But then they tell you that you have to do A, B, C, and D to get the 11 cents. And to do A, B, C, and D, it costs you 15 cents. So how about leaving that 6 cents in the state of New Hampshire from the very beginning and let states determine how they're going to spend that money? I mean, that would be a much better spent resource if that were the case. And there are some departments that stick out that should be abolished. And there are some areas in these departments perhaps that should be retained, but in an entire agency, the Department of Commerce comes to mind, Housing and Urban Development comes to mind, Homeland Security. Come on, do we really need another agency of the federal government when it comes to law enforcement? I don't think so. As governor of New Mexico, I came to recognize that the death penalty is flawed public policy. You may agree with the death penalty, but you know what? There's an error rate when it comes to the death penalty of arguably 4%. I don't want to put one person to death to punish 999 that are guilty, much less 4 when 96 are guilty. When Governor Ryan, in the mid-90s, when Governor Ryan of Illinois ordered a review of 36 inmates on death row, and over 20 of them were released because of DNA testing, and that categorically they were innocent, this is flawed public policy. It costs less to lock a person up for the rest of their lives than it is to put a person on death row and pay for the attorneys that go through endless appeal for those that are on death row. But then when somebody gets off of death row because they've been proven to categorically be innocent, how can you put a price tag on what has been paid to attorneys to accomplish that? Guns, Second Amendment. Look, we support the Second Amendment. But we've also got to be open to a discussion on how you keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill, and we need to be open to a discussion on how you keep guns out of the hands of would-be terrorists. The FBI in Florida, if I were President of the United States, I would want to know what transpired between the FBI and the shooter in Florida. I'll bet the FBI has some real ideas about how we move forward. Obviously, the system worked up until a point, but let's be prudent about that. The military. There was a poll among active military personnel 2 weeks ago on who they favored for President of the United States. I won that poll. Yeah. So what does that say? I think what that says is that these guys, Weld and Johnson, are going to judiciously use the military. They're going to use the military when we're attacked, and we'll attack back. But when it comes to regime change, when it comes to being the world's policeman, look, this has had a really unintended consequence of making things worse, not better. Regime change. Iraq. You've got ISIS that flees to Syria, Libya, or their numbers are strengthened in Syria and Libya. And you can't make this up, and it wasn't intentional. But Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, they went in and they supported the opposition in Syria and Libya to support regime change. We armed the opposition in Syria and Libya to support that regime change. And guess what? The opposition got beaten, and all of those arms ended up in ISIS hands. That's the unintended consequence of being at war all the time. Let's stop being at war. Let's bring the world together with free trade and diplomacy. And with regard to diplomacy, joining arms with Russia, that's how we're going to bring an end to the Syrian conflict. Joining arms with China to deal with what I think is the biggest threat in the world, which is North Korea, and the fact that at some point these intercontinental ballistic missiles are going to actually work. We have 40,000 troops in South Korea. There is zero chance that North Korea is going to invade South Korea conventionally. And if they start launching nukes, we've got them covered with our umbrella, but that's how scary this is. That's why this is the biggest threat in the country, because they may well start doing that. So there's an opportunity here to make the world safer. Imagine if China had 40,000 troops in Central America. We would be going absolutely crazy, and yet that's what we're causing when it comes to us being in South Korea and China. Has America ever been better? Has it ever been better? We get along better than one another. We communicate better with one another. Our kids are smarter than ever, and the number one law enforcement tool that we have is our smartphones in our pockets. And yeah, we've got problems, but you know what? We're communicating with one another better than we've ever done before, and we've got issues. One of those issues is, let me just say this, all right? All lives matter, but Black lives matter. And the reason Black lives matter is because they're getting shot at a rate 6 times that of being white. We've had our heads in the sand over the discrimination that exists. If you are of color and you're arrested on a drug-related crime, there's a 4 times more likelihood that you're going to end up in jail. And that blacks get pulled over inordinately. They get subject to arrest as opposed to those of us that are white. Let's not put our heads in the sand over this. Let's recognize this and move forward. A couple of issues of late with regard to me and the campaign, and I love the campaign. I love, this is supposed to be an intellectual discussion about the issues. And so with regard to a carbon tax, if any of you heard me saying I support a carbon tax, look, I haven't raised a penny of taxes in my entire political career, and neither has Bill. I was looking at what I heard was a carbon fee that potentially from a free market standpoint would actually address the issue and cost less. I have determined that, you know what, it's a great theory, but I don't think that it can work, and I've worked my way through that, all right? And I support a person's right to choose. So when it comes to vaccinations, all right, we should be able to make the decisions as to whether or not we want to vaccinate our kids or not. Now, I choose to vaccinate my kids, and you never say never. Look, in the case of zombie apocalypse taking over the United States, and that there is a vaccine for that, as President of the United States, you might find me mandating that vaccine. I just want to do this in all transparency. Bill and I are not planning an imperial presidency. My goodness, the President of the United States goes down to Walgreens and it costs taxpayers $10 million? Come on. There ought to be a much more affordable way for the president to conduct his office. Count on us as good stewards of that office. Count on us in presidential, vice presidential role to spend less money in those roles than any other president, vice president that you've ever seen, because this is about civil service and making a difference. You all rock. Thank you so much for being here. You have no idea. This is so cool. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You rock. You're wonderful.